And I'm Meredith Berkman. I'm one of the 3 co-founders, and I'm doing this from my home. You're going to hear doorbells, screaming, and barking. So I hope you'll bear with me. Again, people are used to all of this, I think, in the post-COVID or ongoing COVID age of Zoom. In April of 2018, my second child, my one son, 3 daughters and 1 son, came home from his 9th grade at his new school and said to me and my husband that he wanted to tell us about what he called a, quote, mixed message anti-addiction talk that had happened at school that day. And he proceeded to tell me and my husband that in this 9th grade assembly, when the teachers and administrators left the room, which is fairly common with these outside anti-addiction talks, so that the kids will speak freely, this supposed educator began telling this room of kids, of teenagers, about Juul. Now, at that point in April of 2018, I certainly, as a mom, had never heard of Juul. Maybe I had heard of an e-cigarette, but barely. But almost all of the kids in the room, here we are, e-cigarettes and youth vaping, what Oregon parents need to know in 2022. We could go to the next slide. Okay, so this is our backstory. All of the kids in the room knew what Juul was at that point, but we adults did not know for the most part. And many of the kids in the room were already Juuling. And so this adult proceeded to tell them that Juul was for adults, not for kids, but he followed up every statement by saying it was, quote, totally safe. It was for adults, not for kids. But it was, quote, 99.9% safer than traditional cigarettes. And the kicker, it would be receiving FDA approval, quote, any day. Within 24 hours, what I discovered, and having activated 2 other moms I knew to say, did you hear anything like this? That this was in fact a Juul representative. The school had no idea. This outside anti-addiction group, while researching who to come in and talk to the kids about anti-Juuling through the magic of Google Analytics, was brought to the Juul website, where at that time there was a supposed, youth prevention education coordinator. And that is how a Juul rep came into our son's school and told the kids Juuling was, quote, totally safe. So this was our activation point. We started this group around our kitchen tables because we wanted to publicly sound the alarm about what we very quickly realized after doing research and talking to pediatricians and psychologists and researchers that we met over the internet. We wanted to sound the alarm about the predatory practice of this new company called Juul. And we also wanted to sound the alarm about the wild prevalence of youth use. It would be almost 9 months before the then Surgeon General, the then FDA Commissioner, the then Health and Human Services Secretary would refer to this as the youth vaping epidemic. And we did not share that public Juul in the school story until a year later. Somehow we instinctively understood that we could start educating and advocating, but we would wait. There's an email from the day after until we were, quote, in front of a congressional subcommittee. And here's a photo of exactly what happened. My co-founder, Dorian Furman, who's over my left shoulder with the red hair, she and I and our sons, Caleb and Philip, were among those who testified at a 2-day Juul hearing in Congress before the House Oversight Subcommittee on Economics and Consumer Policy, which created a lot of attention about what Juul was doing. So we can go to the next slide. So what we decided to do was educate parents like us about this problem, about this company. And we very quickly realized that in order to take action, to protect our kids and everyone else's kids, because it wasn't just ours, we would have to both educate and advocate. And so we have helped in coalition with many of our public health partners that over the last, literally 4 years ago, last week was our anniversary, we started working towards ending, our advocacy work is focused just on youth and just on flavors, because the research has shown over and over the flavors are addicting the kids to these tobacco products. So our advocacy is focused on ending the sale of all flavored tobacco products, not just flavored e-cigarettes. but including menthol, cigarettes, and all other tobacco products. So these are just a bunch of pictures of us in different places with people in Chicago, in New York, in California. And then there's that picture you might recognize over to the left with the blonde hair is the former president. And then there's someone in a Pepto-Bismol pink dress. That would be me representing parents at this vape meeting in at the White House in 2019, which was a whole other story, but we could go to the next slide. It was the public health groups and the tobacco industry, something that had never happened before or since. So 2022, we are still waiting for regulatory action. The backstory is that when Juul came on the scene in 2016, FDA has not fully regulated any product that came on the market, any flavored e-cigarette or any e-cigarette from 2016 on. So what we're left with now is it is over a year since FDA passed through a court-ordered deadline to rule on all of the applications that these products finally were required to submit to FDA to keep these flavored products on the market. So what do we have? We have disposable e-cigs, single-use e-cigs rising wildly, proliferating in popularity, with Puff Bar most recently being the most popular brand among teens. Up to 10 million of these single-use disposable products are sold per month, and that's only looking at convenience stores. We see that vape detector sales are increasing. There are 650 plus school districts suing Juul, and so many state attorneys general have also sued Juul for marketing to children. And just last week, in fact, on Tuesday, which was actually the 4th anniversary of Three Moms launching what we had intended as a simple website, which became a national grassroots movement to fight tobacco use among kids and to fight the industry. 33 states and Puerto Rico settled with Juul for $440 million, which is an enormous amount of money, it sounds like. But when you look at it, that's only a quarter of what Juul made just last year selling its products. And there's no cost, there's no number that you could use to quantify the human cost of this adolescent public health crisis of vaping that continues to unfold, the public health costs of which will continue to unfold for decades to come. We could go to the next slide. So the most recent figures were collected in 2021, and we are imminently about to get hopefully new figures from FDA. The data collected in early 2021 showed that there were 2.2 million teens vaping. Now, just the year before, the number said 3.6 million, which meant 1 out of every 5 high schoolers were using these products. FDA announced last year that the big drop in the data did not represent a trend because it was done, the data was collected during COVID and it was a different methodology. So frankly, 2.2 million kids, underage kids using flavored e-cigarettes, using tobacco products is 2.2 million too many. And I think we all expect to see that number higher when the new figures come out. But again, we also fear underreporting. And we also know that these national surveys do not look at kids in college. Kids in college are 18, 19, and 20, and no one is cataloging how many of those kids are using. But we can tell you from our partners, from our kids, from parents around the country, that vaping in college among minors in college is widespread. And we, again, are fearing underreporting. But again, 2.2 million, if that's the lowest number, is still 2.2 million kids too many. We can go to the next slide. And the real tragedy of all of this is this generation of teens who would otherwise not have used nicotine or tobacco. We know this because before Juul came on the market, there were the smoking rates among youth were the lowest they'd ever been, below 6%. And so that has been completely reversed. Use of tobacco products for this generation, which would not have happened but for Juul opening this terrible Pandora's box, and so many copycats, Juul copycats following. This is the social norm for these kids. And that's the tragedy that we have to fight as hard as we can. We could go to the next slide. I see that there are questions coming up, and I do want to make sure if anyone has questions. One question is in Spanish, so I can't answer. I'm going to ask, I think, our volunteer director, state and local advocacy director, Cynthia Stremba. Hopefully she can access and answer some of those questions, and I'll try to get to them at the end. This is really
Meredith, just to let you know, those questions have already been dealt with.
Thank you, Cynthia. Oregon youth vaping. By the way, I just want to say one other thing, aside from the fact that we're very proud that our education associate, Charlie Moses, they come from Multnomah County. I also want to say that when we decided to talk to anyone in a position of influence who would listen about Juul and about vaping. And the first person in Washington who gave us a meeting was Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. He has been a big supporter and he cares a lot about this issue. So back to the numbers, among 11th graders in Multnomah County, e-cigarette use was higher than cigarette smoking in 2019. And so you can see that e-cigarette use among 8th graders is at 8.6%. And this makes me sick, and I'm sure it makes everyone listening sick. Among 11th graders, 23.1%. So slightly lower, but not by much, than the national average of about 25%. And those figures are from 2019. So because all the states are staggered, and when they do their local data collection, I'm going to run pretty quickly through some of these slides. The whole idea is, and this came out last week when the settlement was announced, is that Juul at first and the copycats that followed, but just to talk about Juul for a moment, they targeted young people. They used young looking influencers. They used launch parties. Of course, they use flavors. This is all about the flavors, the kid-friendly flavors. And they used targeted social media marketing on platforms where kids were and adults were not. And that's what you see here. We could go to the next slide. And I think this example in particular gets me, because this was in the middle of COVID, but it's sort of a little bit old now, but it was so pointed. In the middle of COVID, Puff Bar, the Juul wannabe, sent out an email talking about, we know everyone's sick of parental texts, using this young woman. You can see this senior citizen over here on my left, who looks like she's about 12, or does she look 75? The gall to talk about parental texts, and spring break was also part of this. Like, clearly they were targeting kids even during the pandemic. And we can go to the next slide. Again, tobacco marketing then and now. You can see that the people who started Juul and the people that followed, they were going out of the same playbook. I think that's not a secret. You can see in the old days with tobacco, for cigarettes, they would use doctors. Even today, sometimes our parent volunteers will be testifying in a local hearing, and there will be a doctor who has to live with himself, but wearing his white coat, speaking on behalf of, for example, like Reynolds Tobacco, saying that we shouldn't end the sale of flavored tobacco. It's not fair. And I have no respect for those people. We can go to the next slide. Marketing at point of sale. I want to point out, because this is a real photo, which I believe we got in Multnomah County. One of the ways this stuff is marketed, if you look, you can see that these vapes, these flavored vapes, are wedged between candy. I don't mean candy metaphorically. I mean candy, right? So one of the final frontiers for a tobacco industry looking to market its products to impressionable and price-sensitive youth. It's at eye-level displays in convenience stores and smoke shops. I know you see this in Oregon. I see this here where I live in New York. There's a higher density of tobacco retailers near schools. It's disgusting. With more ad exposure for children, you get more tobacco use, and particularly insidious and particularly preferred by the tobacco industry and its predatory evil geniuses is there's a higher density of sales of these products near schools in low-income neighborhoods. and in areas where there are more people of color. And that tells you all you need to know about the predatory behavior of big tobacco. We could go to the next slide. Again, to give you another example of just how predatory the industry has been and is again. It's the same playbook, the same bad actors. And we know this because the internal tobacco industry documents that were made public in the 90s after the settlement, enormous, settlement between the tobacco industry and so many states in this country, we know that tobacco has and continues to specifically target LGBTQ populations, former military veterans, low-income neighborhoods, rural populations, racial and ethnic minorities, Native Americans, people with mental illness, and again, in addition to priority populations, the vulnerable population of children, which is what we focus on. And you can go to the next slide. And again, menthol is a particularly insidious way that the industry has and continues to target vulnerable populations of youth and priority populations. 85% of African-American smokers use menthol combustible cigarettes, and that is not a surprise. It is by design. In 2009, when the federal government ended the sale of all flavored cigarettes, a deal was cut and menthol cigarettes were allowed to remain on the market because they represented an enormous amount of money, because at that point, the industry had spent decades targeting specifically African-American populations. I would suggest, if you have interest and want to know more about this, you can find a mini documentary called Black Lives, Black Lungs on YouTube. You can go to the website of our partners at the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. Their website, and I very much encourage you to take a look, is savingblacklives.org. Menthol encourages nicotine addiction and dependence. In fact, menthol amplifies the addictive qualities of nicotine, whether it's in a cigarette or in an e-cigarette. And that's one of the reasons that we're very focused on making sure that FDA does not authorize any menthol product, because menthol hooks kids. You could go to the next slide. So why are these awful products still available? Again, because FDA has failed to fully regulate these products for years. Some of the flavor policies that came out of the federal government over the last few years inexplicably exempted disposable products that are wildly proliferating, that the kids are using, e-liquids, and again, menthol products. And until very recently, synthetic nicotine was a way that the industry was skirting regulation. And for example, Puff Bar began claiming that it was using synthetic nicotine because synthetic nicotine was not under the authority of FDA. Thankfully, that has changed. We could go to the next slide. But we're still way behind. I'm going to sort of go quickly. On the other hand, there may be people on this call who don't know what these products look like. Puff Bar, this says Puff Flow. You can see Stig, Miley Mini, very popular, Air Bar. And these come in, they claim to be, tobacco-free nicotine. Oh, sorry. And you can hear some of my kids, but NTN. And only now has FDA just in July, has there been a deadline for these products to apply? In all cases, we believe FDA should have and should remove all these products, even if they have applied, put them back on once they've reviewed these applications. We could go to the next slide. These are some of the pod base. We've talked about Juul. Oh, and look, you can learn how to refill it on YouTube. Views is popular. You get some of the ideas. These are pod base, Smoke, Swarren. You could go to the next slide. These are some of the refillables that were allowed to remain on the market. Puff Tarts. Gee, I wonder who that's targeting. Or Bubble Gang. Gee, I really wonder who that's for. I think you all get the idea. We could go to the next slide. And then there is the problem of other flavored nicotine products. The tobacco industry is shape-shifting so quickly, which is why we who care about protecting kids from tobacco have to stay one step ahead of them. And I can tell you that some of the products represented here, things like Zyn and Velo, these nicotine pouches, which claim that they do not, it's tobacco-free nicotine, and they've had to apply for FDA approval. Well, we've been hearing for years now, and we have informed FDA in one of our many meetings early on that a lot of kids worried that teachers got hip to what a Juul looked like. So if you're addicted, you can hold one of these very flavored, fun flavored pouches of nicotine in your mouth during the school day until you can either go to the bathroom and take a hit or get home or get through a practice. And then there are Pixatine flavored toothpicks. There are also products like flavored gum. Lucy gum is one of them. We can go to the next slide. So again, we really have to be vigilant, and parents have to constantly, hopefully check in on our website, parentsagainst-vaping.org, where you can find resources that will let you see what these products look like. We've also discussed just last week with the new FDA commissioner and the new head of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products, our concerns about non-nicotine vapes. I only learned about this because my youngest child, who was then 12 or 13, asked me if she could get a quote melatonin vape. And I thought she meant like a diffuser that melatonin would waft through her room because she was having trouble sleeping. But no, a quick jump on Amazon and some research revealed that there are companies like Monk, M-O-N-Q, Ripple, R-I-P-P-L-E, Cloudy, C-L-O-U-D-Y, and Love, L-U-V-V, that claim they do not have nicotine, but they use all the same flavors, all the same chemicals that are in nicotine vapes, like propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, at very, very high heat. These are not safe, and they're completely unregulated. And the worst part is they are normalizing vaping behavior for younger kids because there's no age verification, and they can get them over the counter or online from Urban Outfitters, et cetera. So that's a real problem we're trying to get ahead of. We could go to the next slide. Again, the idea here is that vapes are much more addictive than cigarettes. There are enormous amounts of nicotine, so much more than in cigarettes. And it was Juul that created this new technology, a new delivery system of nicotine salts that would allow in these stealth by design tech chic products for enormous amounts of nicotine to hit the bloodstream so fast. And they can be used constantly. I mean, constantly we hear of kids who wake up in the middle of the night, their devices under their pillow, and they're sucking on it and falling back asleep. It's the first thing they hit in the morning, et cetera. We can go to the next slide. What's in that vape? Let's just call it nothing good. I'll let you see cadmium. There's nickel that you're sucking deep into your lung. There's nicotine, formaldehyde. Now, some of these products like glycerin may be safe. They may be considered safe, but certainly not for ingesting and sucking into your lungs at very, very high heat. And many of these chemicals, which are known carcinogens, when they're connect with another chemical, they make a third unknown chemical. So it's extremely dangerous. And the flavors are proprietary information. We really don't know in the end what's in that vape. We can go to the next slide. So how does vaping affect the body? Adolescent brain is highly susceptible to addiction, and the brain continues to develop until 25 or 26. The use of nicotine in kids creates pathways for further addiction, right? So your brain is rewired for addiction. That's why they call nicotine the gateway, because it leads you to other substances. It causes permanent cognitive changes. Cynthia is asking to please put the questions in the chat. Worsened memory, processing speed, impulse control, mood disorders. It can worsen anxiety and depression. Some of these products advertise to teens that it can help you with your depression and anxiety, but in fact, the opposite is absolutely true. We could go to the next slide. What does it do to your lungs? nothing good. The vape aerosol, as I said earlier, contains heavy metals, ultrafine particulates, so many chemicals, and they are sucked down so deep into your lungs, irritating the cilia, the very fine hairs that line your pathways, and inflammation. There's potential for allergies to the hidden ingredients. There are studies, everything here, you can see, you can see where they're the footnotes, but there are multiple studies that show the use of these products. I won't say that it causes asthma, but if you have asthma, it absolutely elevates your asthma and can lead to catastrophic asthma attacks, which we have seen among many of the parents that come to us. And again, it leads to chronic lung disease. It is a terrible, terrible thing to do to anyone's lungs, but we're focused on the vulnerable developing lungs of kids. And we can go to the next slide. How does it affect the body otherwise? Nicotine is a stimulant, restricts blood flow, it increases blood pressure, your heart rate, your adrenaline. It can cause cardiovascular disease, and the flavor chemicals are toxic to heart cells. I mean, I think this speaks for itself. Additional risks, a weakened immune system, seizures from nicotine poisoning. We hear about this all the time. FDA recently stated that they're still trying to figure out the connection between seizures and youth and use of these products. We hear about this all the time. A lot of the kids whose parents reach out to us have lost enormous amounts of weight. They have gastrointestinal issues. I don't mean 5 or 10 pounds. I mean huge, drastic weight loss. Again, negative impact on the microbiomes of your mouth, which can also affect immune responses, and later disease, prediabetes, high blood sugar. We can go to the next slide. People talk a lot about the EVALI outbreak, which got a lot of attention. Up until February 2020, the CDC was following on a weekly basis from the summer of 2019 until February 2020. There were reports all across the country of almost 3,000 recorded cases and 70 deaths of young people with high fever, mostly young people, extreme difficulty breathing, the weight loss. Ultimately, EVALI was linked to vitamin E acetate in THC, but 14% of those nearly 3,000 were due to nicotine alone. And more importantly is we continue at the city and state level all over the country to hear that there are ongoing cases of vaping associated lung injury. It is often misdiagnosed. It is not fully understood. It is still a major problem. You can go to the next slide. COVID-19, I'll be very quick about this. The research has shown out of Stanford and other places as well, I think Johns Hopkins, youth who vape are more likely to get COVID-19 and have more severe symptoms. That makes it stands to common sense as well. You've depressed the integrity of your lungs. Vaping damages the lungs and immune system. Smoking and vaping increase the spread of COVID-19 because of hand-to-mouth contact and cough. We can go to the next slide. I think this, I'm sorry that we lost some time because really this
Meredith,
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt your flow, but we do have a question that pertained to previous, and that's about the Juul settlement.
Sure.
And the question is, what does this mean for the vape companies and who does the payout go to?
Okay, and that question is from Sumayo Mohammed. So I want to thank you very, very much for that question. And I'll just tell you very briefly, as we said earlier, the settlement that you're referring to was announced last Tuesday, but no one has yet seen. I think it's still being hammered out. 33 states and Puerto Rico settled with Juul for marketing to kids for $440 million, and it's divided by the size of state. I think Connecticut gets $3 million. I can't recall Oregon, but I can tell you, for example, that Texas got the biggest amount. The problem is, and this is something I'm sure we'll come back to in Multnomah County and across the country, it's going to be really, really important for people who care about kids and protecting them from predatory behavior from Juul and the ones that have followed, is that money is going ultimately, and it could take a while, but that money will come to each state, and it will be up to the state legislature to determine what that money is used for. The state attorneys general, they may suggest, and their intention may be that money should go to what we would all hope for: youth prevention and youth cessation and resources. We believe parent education and youth education. but it will be up to the legislature to determine where the money actually goes. And so it's really important for parents and prevention specialists to, at the right moment, make sure that your elected officials understand that when the Juul money comes in, it can't just go to other things. This is an ongoing adolescent public health crisis, and we must have that money used for those who were harmed, and that is the young people who were addicted and their families whose lives have been upended by the physical harm, the psychological harm, the addiction. So that money, we all must make enough noise when the money comes through your state to let people know that the money can't just go to other things. It has to go for youth prevention, cessation, education, etc. So thank you for the question. Reasons teens vape. The flavors are the key to all of this. Among high schoolers, 85% use flavored products. 37% are using flavored products with menthol. Menthol is among the most popular flavors. And by the way, what the kids are using now are called iced flavors: iced blueberry, iced mint, iced raspberry. Iced is an industry phrase that is mentholated. So the use of menthol among youth, it'll be another year before the federal surveys even ask youth if they're using iced flavors. So we fear the use of menthol among kids is way higher, which is why we believe no menthol products should be authorized by FDA. They're affordable, they're discreetly used and delivered. We could go to the next slide. Again, why teens vape. Social pressure, heightened stress, anxiety. We talked about that. A lot of kids like the head rush from the nicotine kick. Extremely high addictiveness and perceived lower risk. At the beginning, the majority of kids said they thought it was just sugar water flavors and vapor. And there are even to this day kids who don't quite get it. And certainly there are lots of parents who still feel that, they hear that it may be safe or means it's safe. These are not safe products for teens, for anyone, frankly, but we're focused on teens. Hiding in plain sight. We can go to the second slide. Looks like a kid's desk. You can see we're pointing out here what looks like a computer charger is in fact a vape. What looks like a pen is in fact a vape. It's really insidious. It's hiding in plain sight and by design, because this is how they're, duping us as adults, and even to an extent, duping the kids to think that it's sort of funny to get away with, which it's not. Go to the next slide. 10 signs that your kids are vaping. These 10 signs, if you see one or two, it doesn't mean your child is vaping, but there are things to think about. A secretive attitude, a closed door, frequent excuses to use the restroom or go outside. Every kid seems like they do that. But what we're really talking about is things that you notice that you didn't notice before that are sudden. A sweet smell, use of candles or room fresheners to disguise the smell. When my son asked for a, I forget what you call it, but like an incense burner, I thought, oh, he's so spiritual. I mean, he may be spiritual, but that's not why he wanted the incense burner. The propylene glycol in these products really dries out your mucous membranes in your nose, your throat, your mouth. There's a terrible hacking cough, frequent nosebleed, mouth sores, constantly drinking water, craving more salt or spice, and then unusual items like these colorful plastic caps or USB drives or small highlighters or pens, everywhere, like as we just showed you. We can go to the next slide. Changes in sleeping patterns. Again, I mentioned the raspy cough, the lung infection, chest pain. One of my kids kept complaining of chest pain. I thought she had heartburn, shortness of breath, pneumonia, a heightened caffeine sensitivity, jitteriness, the mood disorders caused by nicotine addiction. Not just normal, quote, anxiety, but real anger, mood swings, kids becoming violent or flying off the handle in a way they didn't before, changes in eating habits, nausea, again, the gastrointestinal issues, being sick, unknown or increased spending or deliveries. Again, you may see one of these and be concerned. You might see all of them and not need to be concerned. You're really looking for things that stand out that you didn't see before. And again, every child is different. Every family is different. Follow your instincts. If you think something is up, then you're going to want to go to our next slide where we'll talk to you about how do I talk to my child about vaping. This is so important. It is not a one-time conversation, and parents have to educate themselves. Like that's our goal, is to educate parents so that we as parents know enough to then have a conversation. And I don't mean, hey, are you vaping? 9 out of 10 kids, 9.5 out of 10 kids will say, no, I'm not vaping. Even if you find something that's a vape product, they'll say, no, that's not mine. I mean, that's happened to me. I think that's happened almost to every parent. The key is you want to have an open dialogue. You want your kids to know that you support them. You understand this is a problem for their generation. We have to remember our kids were targeted. They may not think that vaping is harmful because it seems normal. So you need to do your homework so you can understand the health effects that you want to discuss with them. And we can go to the next slide. Start early, late elementary school, because by middle school, there are so many kids who are not only aware of these products, but using them. You can use situations in which you see vaping on the street, if you pass a vape shop, on TV. Again, it's not a one-time conversation. And you want to be really careful. Again, you don't want to be accusatory. We'll go to the next slide. There's not one single approach. It's talking with them, not at them. I think we often say, I hear there's a lot of vaping going on at all schools and even at your school. Like, what's it like when you go to the bathroom? Is it uncomfortable because kids are vaping, or what happens when you go to a party? What is that? What is it like to be, a teen during this time? Is there a vape detector at school? Engage them in a conversation. It's not to say that there are no rules, that there are no consequences, but if you are the 1 in 5, if you are that one parent whose child is the 1 out of 5 kids who is using these products, you don't punish for addiction, you partner with your child, you help them get help for addiction. If you are lucky enough to be among the 4 parents whose kids are not vaping, you still want to be vigilant. You want them to know that if they ever have concern about a friend or about themselves or about trying something, they can come to you and you will work with them. You will help them. You will get them help if they're addicted and you understand this sensitive topic. They may share information with you and beg you not to share it with another parent. You want to avoid scare tactics and exaggeration because the facts are so scary. All you need to do is put the facts out there. We can go to the next slide. Again, you want to talk with them, not at them, and be an advocate. You want to model behavior. If you smoke, don't smoke in front of them if that's possible. If you vape, don't vape in front of them if that's possible. Easy for me to say because I'm not a smoker or a vapor. And if you are, there's no judgment here. It's just try not to do it in front of your kids. Model the behavior you want them to adopt. Encourage them if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, talking with other trusted adults at a community center, at a church. We have parents with addicted kids who sought out, in one case in the state of Maryland, an assistant principal, when this child was in the bathroom and could smell the other kids vaping and started to sort of shake, he would text his mom and the mom would call the assistant principal who would come into the bathroom, take the kid to his office and sort of help him to recenter himself. I mean, we're talking about educators who hopefully if you partner with your schools, they want to help these kids too. Talk with a pediatrician, local addiction specialist. You want to use quick resources. And again, go easy on yourself. Our kids were targeted by an industry. It is not your fault or theirs, which again is not to say that we don't believe in rules or consequences in general. You can join our private online support group on Facebook. You can find it at Parent Support Group, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes. We have a closed group of, I think, almost 500 parents who are struggling with addicted kids, and it is a safe space for parents to share their concerns. We could go to the next slide. I just want to make sure I haven't missed any questions. Supporting your teen to quit. Talk with a pediatrician or a local smoking or substance use prevention specialist. There are lots of tools out there. There are NRTs that can be prescribed by a doctor or medication. We mentioned the Truth Initiative. This is quitting. There's a parent track of this scientifically proven app and text support and a kid track. And we're going to get in 1 second to the Oregon resources. There's also teen.smokefree.gov, but let's go to the Oregon page. And if anybody wants to take a picture of that, or you can get from Vibrant Future later on, there's the Oregon Tobacco Quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW or quitnow.net/Oregon, the Department of Health, Oregon.gov/OHA for local info and statistics. And this is really important. Here's this number, 971-673-2283, to report tobacco violations if you know where retailers are selling these products to minors. Flavors Hook Oregon Kids, a statewide movement to protect Oregon kids from the tobacco industry. FlavorsHookOregonKids.org. So I hope we'll share this with you again. Go to the next slide. School-based curricula. Again, we absolutely believe that parents should partner with their schools to push them to provide enough education and to look for alternatives to suspension for kids who are using. Some of our partners include the Stanford Medicine Tobacco Prevention Toolkit, which we highly recommend. The Catch Global Foundation's Catch My Breath program. If you have interest in this, you could email us at the end and ask us, and we'll send you. It's also on our website. We can go to the next slide. We have a youth campaign we're very proud of called Vapes or Trash. And that's because parents kept saying, how do I get my kid to realize it's not good? They don't care. They're not listening about the developing brain, the developing lungs. Well, kids in this generation, as we all should, care so much, and I'm sure in Oregon, about environmental, justice. And these products are so harmful. This is a social media campaign that we're building out in hopefully in Oregon. We recently did this here in New York City, and it's called vapesortrash.org. And I hope you'll direct your kids to that. And I want to get now to the next slide. Current efforts. Your voices really matter. In fact, the Multnomah County County Board has asked to hear, they have asked to hear from parents through the County Board of Health to hear what you think. And you can see here, there's a proposal to end the sale of flavored tobacco and nicotine products. So we need adults, parents, caregivers, prevention specialists to let the Board of Health know, urge through the Board of Health, urge decision makers to protect our kids by eliminating the sales of all menthol and all other flavored tobacco and nicotine products in all locations. If you scan this QR code by holding up your phone and going to the camera, and you scan that code, it should take you to this form. We can go to the next slide, where we give you here just a sample. You can fill in, and you can say it any way you like. We're just saying, my name is Meredith Berkman. I'm a parent and a volunteer, which I am. We're full-time volunteers. Our organization nationally is run by full-time volunteers, and a volunteer with Parents Against Vaping e-cigarettes. If you prefer not to mention PAVE, that's fine. We just want to get your voices there. I fully support a comprehensive ban of menthol and all other flavored tobacco products in all locations. Please end the sale of these flavored products and save the children of Multnomah from the devastating effect of nicotine addiction and tobacco industry targeting. You can say anything you like. We're just giving you an example. Again, here's the QR code. And I guess we would encourage everyone to encourage their friends, family members, teachers, church members, whatever it is, community members, to share their support for this as well. And we could go to the next slide. Again, we would appreciate if you'd give us feedback and sign up and join us as volunteers. As I said, we are volunteer run and powered. We're only as good as the passionate parents who join us. Volunteer could mean you sign up and follow us on social media, or you sign up and you don't follow us, or maybe you want to take action. Maybe you'd like to be trained as an educator. You'd like to get more involved. You'd like to find other things that are happening in Multnomah County as this issue heats up, or maybe you just want to log on to our website and share it with others that care about protecting kids from tobacco use. We just need as many volunteers, as many parents as we can get in Multnomah County, in Oregon, and around the country to join us. We won't let the tobacco industry turn this young generation into their next lifetime customers. So I think we have the last slide finally. join our parent support group by scanning here. You can reach out to us. You can always reach out to us by emailing us at info@parentsagainst.vaping.org. And you can see our Instagram, our Twitter, and our Facebook. And I think that is the last slide. Am I wrong or right? I want to make sure if we have a minute, which I hope we do, and we're already over, maybe we don't. Are there any additional questions? Multnomah County Public Health partnered with our neighboring counties. Thank you, Derek Smith of Clackamas and Washington, for a current youth campaign to help youth quit. That's fantastic. Free posters are available and free text-based services to quit vaping. And Derek, thank you. Put the link to that in the chat, which I hope everyone can see and access. So I just want to thank you all for bearing with us. I'm sorry we went slightly over. I'm sorry we had a late start. I hope that those who were in the Spanish presentation appreciated the information there as well. And if you have any questions, you can always reach us again, info@parentsagainstVaping.org. And I again want to thank our partners at Vibrant Future for doing this event with us. And we hope to get as many parents from Multnomah and around the state to join us in our work. And thank you so much again for caring so much about protecting our kids.